Hello and welcome. My name is Bruce Call. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for ASEA, and it's my pleasure today to be joined by two experts in the field of redox signaling. We have with us Dr. Gary Samuelson, PhD. Dr. Samuelson, of course, has his PhD in atomic medical physics from the University of Utah. And in addition to a long career in nanoparticle research and the commercialization of this research, Dr. Samuelson also is a distinguished teacher. He has won the American Association of Physics Teachers Award for teaching excellence. And so he really comes to us with a vast background, not only of specific knowledge in nanoparticles and in particular redox signaling, but also the ability to communicate that well through his teaching abilities. So Dr. Samuelson, welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Dr. David Carpenter with us. Now, Dr. Carpenter is a very well-known naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist. He studied at the University of Victoria in Melbourne, Australia, its College of Health Sciences in Columbus, Ohio. He is a nationally board-certified as a naturopathic medical doctor and is a member of a number of associations. Now, he's spent his entire career, more than 20 years, of clinical experience helping thousands of people with all kinds of health issues. So it's great to have you with us today, Dr. Carpenter.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Great to be here with you, gentlemen.
Excellent. Well, we want to talk today about renal health, our renal system. And prior to doing that, though, I think it would be a good idea to spend a little bit of time and get some background on redox signaling itself, what redox signaling is and why it's important to us. Maybe you can take us through that, Dr. Samuelson.
Yes, thank you. Our body is made out of systems, and our systems are made out of tissues, and our tissues are made out of cells.
Okay.
So everything in our body deals with these cells. We can think of the cells as a community. They need to be able to talk to one another. And the redox signaling molecules that are inside of our cells are the media that allows our cells to be able to communicate. And so I like to think of our cells in an analogy as being like houses along a street, where the street represents the blood vessels that connect all of the cells in our body. The blood vessels have to carry in the supplies that the cells use, such as oxygen and food, and they carry out the garbage that is produced as a matter of life inside the cells. These cells, though, don't exist as a single cell. They are communities. They have three mechanisms inside themselves, that help them communicate with one another. One is what I call a cell phone. Mm-hmm. And this cell phone is a medium of electrical communication between the cells in a very rapid way. Just like the cell phones we have, the amount of bars on our cell phone depend on how well these cells communicate with each other. And then we have little mailboxes, which allow chemical messaging. They allow sugars to come in, for example, and the garbage to come out. And we're talking about a lot of about what the kind of trash that the body creates today. And inside our house is just like our normal communities. We create a lot of trash.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And this trash builds up, and we shovel it out into our streets. It needs to be picked up by the blood system and carried away. Redox signaling helps these little mailboxes, and they're the ways that get the trash out of the house.
Okay.
And so also we have antioxidants inside of our cells, and these are the shields that protect our cells against these harmful free radicals. Some of these redox signaling molecules are actually very reactive. They're oxidants. Mm-hmm. They're free radicals, and so you have to be able to neutralize them. And the free radicals are neutralized by the antioxidants, which are also created right inside of our cell. Maintain a homeostatic balance. When this balance is disturbed, it's sort of like having a fire inside of our house. Mm-hmm. Why would we want to bring a fire inside our house when a fire could damage us?
Well, there are reasons, right?
Sure.
I mean, a furnace or a stove or a fireplace.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of devices that inside the house. The house really wouldn't work very well without the fire inside. Mm-hmm. And so the houses are built with fireplaces and furnaces, as you mentioned, that contain and control these very destructive elements. But when these cells, when the mechanisms get out of control, or the fireplaces are not working as correctly as they should due to damage or whatever, then we start seeing sparks and smoke and everything come out of these fireplaces. We can't deal with the smoke. We can't deal with the oxidants and the free radicals, and they become destructive and damaging to our cells. You see it? You see the analogy?
Yeah, sure.
Comes the messenger system that allows the body to recognize that damage has taken place, and then the body has its own genetic code that it can push, genes that it can push, that will help communicate this problem with the environment, with the immune system, with everything else that needs to go on in order to be able to repair the damage and or take the house down, repair it, and replace it with a neighboring house. And so you can imagine in a community how important that is.
Yeah.
And so redox signaling being the mediator of all of these signaling systems in our body are extremely important. Without these redox signaling messengers in our body, we wouldn't be able to respond.
We wouldn't function.
Or the cells wouldn't be able to respond. We wouldn't function.
That's true. Very good point. Thank you for that. That's a superior analogy to provide a background, I think, so that we can have a basic understanding of how important, how vital redox signaling is to the functioning of our cells, which means our organs and our systems. That's very good. We're talking about one system today, and that's the renal system. And I wonder, Dr. Carpenter, if you would just take us on a very basic overview of what the renal system is and its importance to our body.
I'd love to, Bruce. The renal system is basically comprised of the kidneys. These are two fist-sized, bean-shaped organs that sit in the lower back. And it also is connected to the bladder, which is part of that system, by a couple of tubes called ureters. And to talk about what these do, they basically are part of the waste management system of the body. And they connect with other parts of that, which, like the lungs and the skin and the bowels, are probably the three main ones, the intestines. And these systems work hand in hand. The kidneys help clean up the blood. The kidneys take a lot of waste that has been collected and purify the blood. And in fact, I believe, if my memory is correct, that as we process this waste over a period of 24 hours, the average adult will process about 1.5 quarts of urine, which is where they dump that waste. And of course, that goes down through the ureter about every 15 seconds or so and dumps into the bladder. And then the bladder gets rid of it when the time is right.
Excellent. Dr. Samuelson, your thoughts?
Well, we were talking about redox signaling before as being the emergency, the communication system that when something goes wrong, but it's also a communication system when something goes right. The thing is that the kidneys have all sorts of little filtering systems in there. They have to be able to sort through all of the garbage that comes to them on a molecular level. And they consist of all sorts of layers of very specialized muscles and things that keep things moving inside the kidney. And all of these layers have to be aware of what's happening with the other layers and communicate with the others and work together to perform this critical filtering task that we're talking about. And that involves a high degree of redox signaling system. In fact, there probably isn't another organ in the body that uses this redox signaling so efficiently as the kidneys. They have recognized toxins, they recognize other things, and they also help. They have their own hormones that communicate with the rest of the body, and they tell the rest of the body, for example, the heart, to pump a little bit harder to get the toxins out if it recognizes toxins and other things along that line. It's amazing.
So, and maybe you can respond to this, Dr. Carpenter. I'm learning something. I always learn something when I talk to you guys. And I've understood the kidneys as filters, but maybe I've misunderstood because I see that thing. And what you're telling me is it's a very active process that needs to be well coordinated, this filtration process. Is that right, Dr. Carpenter?
Absolutely, Bruce. It is a very complex system. And the process of removing waste from the body is only one part of this, but it's very, it's a large thing. It takes up a lot of energy, takes up a lot of resources from the body, and it has to happen 24 hours a day. We're constantly being exposed to things that have to be eliminated from the body. Interestingly, we were talking about the skin earlier, and many healers will refer to that as the largest kidney or the third kidney of the body. And it doesn't work the same, but it's referred that way because when we perspire, we're helping the kidneys get rid of some of this waste. So it's kind of interesting when you hear that, and I just thought I'd throw that in as an observation. But this system is kind of mind-boggling to me. The more I study it, the more in the Creator's ability to make this body work the way it does.
The function, I am in awe also. I look at it on an atomic level, and it's really interesting because on an atomic level, you have all these physical laws that fit the molecules together, et cetera, and you wonder how in the world they're coordinated on a macroscopic level, and yet they are. And so these little redox signaling messengers in our kidneys and the other signaling messengers help us to respond. The hormones that we were talking about also affect our kidneys. As you know, I was talking with a doctor, Chase Peterson, and he told me, the kidneys expel the excess salt that's in your system, and he says, how much salt do they expel? And I thought for a minute, and I didn't know. He said, well, how much salt did you eat today? Kidneys are absolutely great at taking the chemical messengers and the concentrations inside of our blood, and the excess water balance is important for kidneys, and deciding how much it should be expelled into the urine. And they do that with very careful balance with the thyroid glands and other things which monitor salt in our blood, and it's a very complex communication system. It involves a lot of mailboxes. They send specific mail to the different systems of the body, and the different systems respond and send mail back to the kidneys. And these mailboxes then have to be functioning very well in order for our kidneys to function correctly also.
Absolutely. You were talking earlier about all of the layers in the kidney, and I was just thinking about just the job of the nephrons and how unique that is and how fast they scrub garbage. I kind of like to hire some of those guys to clean my house once in a while. But, as I just think about that, how they break down the proteins, break down into urea, and how the kidneys work with all of that, I guess I have to say more than anything, I'm just totally amazed that they keep doing it, and they keep doing it over and over and over and over again if we take care of them. And that's where I see redox being so darn important because it, as you said, of all the organs I think about, the renal system, and particularly the kidneys, are the most overworked, underpaid guys in the body, and that's really why they need so much extra help.
That sure makes sense. What are some of the things then that could damage our kidneys and cause that process to break down a little bit?
Well, I think you're referring to things like chemicals that might be in the food. Obviously, injuries would be one. Dehydration is a big one. It's amazing what starts to happen when you just get dehydrated. The kidneys get overworked quickly that way. Certainly, there's a lot of things in the environment and in the world that we have to deal with on a daily basis that overwork the kidneys and cause a lot of grief for the kidneys.
Chronic imbalances in hormones and blood sugars and poor hydration, like you mentioned, all things that allows the kidney function to be a little bit lost or a little less effective. You're very familiar, though, with the clinical problems that might be caused because our renal system breaks down. Could you just address that a little bit, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most common urinary tract infections, because it affects the bladder, get a infection in there. But kidney stones are another major issue that we have to deal with the renal system and those little calcification stones, if you will, that build up. And then, of course, there's things like cystitis. It's an inflammatory condition. And another one that the men have to deal with more is enlarged prostate, basically, where the prostate starts to reduce the ability to eliminate the urine from the bladder. And so although I don't always think of those systems going together, they impact each other so much that it starts to have a real impact on the kidneys. And there are multiple kidney disorders that come to mind. But I guess what I want to say here is they all kind of fall into some general patterns of either deal with the load they're being asked to deal with, or they're being invaded by something, and the immune system may not be able to effectively deal with that invasion, and it starts to weaken the cells individually in the kidneys.
So when we talk about kidney health or the renal system, first of all, it's clear, in all of the discussions that we've had over the various conversations that have taken place, you start realizing that no one system is unimportant, right? They're each vital in their own way. Clearly, the renal system, the ability to eliminate waste, particularly from the blood, is absolutely vital to our overall health. I just have a question that's kind of off the wall, but why do we have two kidneys? Why not just one, Dr. Carpenter? Any ideas?
I don't know that I have a great answer for that, but I think we need a backup, number one.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, by having a dual system there, we have a lot of protection.
So it's some redundancy.
There is some redundancy there. Now, luckily, we didn't do that with every system in the body. It would get a little complicated.
But I've always found that interesting, and obviously that allows us, to survive if we have one kidney that shuts down. There's a little redundancy there.
Yeah, I think there has to be something built in a little bit, because the kidneys sure do handle a lot of toxins.
Yeah.
More so than any other part of the body. Those kidneys have to be able to get toxins are toxins to cells in the kidney too.
Oh yeah, sure.
So the cells have to have this protective mechanism inside themselves. The antioxidants inside the kidney, these shields that we were talking about that keep the free radicals and from damaging us, have to be activated even more so inside the kidney, because they're dealing with very undesirable stuff.
Gotcha. They're dealing with nothing but toxins. Right?
Yeah, they're on the front lines.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that way. That is fascinating. So we talked about some things that we can do. Let's talk about some things that we can do for the health of our renal system, for the health of our kidneys. One thing that I heard loud and clear, Dr. Carpenter, was hydration.
Absolutely. Hydration, I think, is the first step, because everything going through the kidneys has to be carried by water, basically. And all of the processes that take place in the kidney need water to make that happen. And I've thought about this a lot. If the kidneys, on average, for an adult, get rid of 1.5 quarts of water per day of producing urine, if you're only drinking 1 quart, where's the rest of the water coming from? And we can get some from our food, no doubt. But there's other organs in the body that need water too. So I think one of the big mistakes a lot of us make is we don't point. I think there's a lot of other things we can do. Certainly, being careful what you put in your body has a huge impact on the life expectancy and efficiency of your kidneys and their health. I think in Chinese medicine, we talk about the kidneys as a set of glands that relate to the emotion fear. And I've found often that the emotions create their own set of chemicals in the body that we often talk about, and maybe not enough. But that can overwork the kidneys too. And so in Chinese medicine, we would teach people to figure out ways around their fear so that the fears are not so paralyzing. I mean, think of a young child for just a minute who is so frightened that they can't control their bladder and their kidneys. And it's an interesting response when you think about it, but fright is the cause. And it paralyzed that whole system. So I think it is an important part of this discussion to just throw that in there. And so I think, if we can just look at the big picture and take care of our emotional health, take care of our physical environment as best we can, and certainly put good, healthy foods and plenty of water in our body, I think it makes a huge difference.
You make a point that we've actually had come up in other discussions, Dr. Samuelson, and that is the sort of, for lack of a better term, the relationship between emotional stress and oxidative stress.
Yeah, it all works together in every organ of our body, and then especially in the kidneys. All this communication system, the endocrine system, the balance of hormones in our body has a lot to do with how well our kidneys function, for example. Of course, the circulatory system has a well to do, because that's the thing that pushes all the blood through the kidneys, And then the nervous system, stress, and stress affects all of the systems of our body, especially the kidneys. And so, we can't really say one is better than the other, but the communications have to take place. What Dr. Carpenter was saying about proper hydration is extremely important when we have infections and other things that stress the body for whatever reason. And the cells start to break down in that case. And as we had mentioned in the houses, huge whole communities of houses are broken down, and they dump that garbage out into the streets. And that garbage has to be dealt with. And so the kidneys, if it has enough hydration, it has the proper things that it needs to do its job correctly, it does it much better.
Yeah, great. Let's sort of transition now into the particular role of redox signaling as it relates to this entire renal system, and maybe we can talk about the entire impact on the kidneys and the renal system.
I'll just say a few words, kind of in follow-up to what I was saying before. Inside the kidney, we have that filtration system and whatnot, very important. Toxins build up. The redox signaling molecules are the things that refurbish the shields that help protect the kidneys from the toxins that are inside them themselves. That's a very important function. They're also form part of the communication network that let the kidneys sort out the trash, know which ones are going, which ones are staying, and which ones should be here. So protection of the kidneys as well as proper functional communications are a very, very important part of that process. It's all part of redox signaling. Can I explain that just a little bit better?
Yeah, sure.
The oxidative stress builds up inside of our cells when we have damage. And this is an imbalance of the redox signaling molecules that happen to take place because of the damaged mechanisms inside of our cells. This damn messenger, basically, it's the signal that lets the cell know that something is wrong. This imbalance, the smoke that's coming out of the cell, I call it.
Yeah, you've called them smoke signals before,
Smoke
right?
signals,
Yeah,
right.
okay.
Something is wrong. And then the cell takes all of these different measures. It has all the different genes that it can push up in there to correct the problem. And that sort of a thing is the real mechanism of repair and replace inside of damaged tissue. It's happening in our kidneys so very often because our kidney cells are becoming damaged on a second-by-second basis.
Because of the function that they perform.
Oh, absolutely. Because of the function they perform and being in the toxic environment that they are and the communications that everything plays. So those poor guys, like he said, are overworked and underpaid and need more than almost the other cells do. So this redox signaling system's got to be in place there. This emergency response system to repair and replace our houses in our kidneys.
Well, it's
our
like
cells.
It's like having it's having emergencies every 10th of a second of every hour of every day.
Right.
Is that
exactly.
right?
Uh-huh.
I think that's a part of the answer to your why do we have two kidneys question, Bruce, is they need a little time off. But it's absolutely phenomenal how they do deal with this day in and day out. They are amazing in that they're constantly dealing with this abuse. And I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that, actually, just day in and day out. They're on the front lines. And so that's why we want to take care of them. because they're getting hammered every single day, all the time, by every direction.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So let's maybe just wrap this up. And let me start with you, Dr. Carpenter. Maybe walk us through once more, in just a sort of a recap fashion, why it's important that we take care of our kidneys, the things that we can do, and how redox signaling factors in.
Well, I think once we understand what the role of the kidneys and the renal system is, which is primarily to remove all of the waste that are being thrown at us, as one of the systems that do that anyway, I think that it's very critical that we take good care of our kidneys by plenty of hydration, that we manage the stress load that we're constantly under, and we all are, but we can reduce that by finding proactive things to do. And if you're not sure what that means, get with somebody that does and get some help there, because that's a big piece of it. Certainly the nutrition that you take into your body has a lot of influence on how much work the kidneys have to deal with the waste. So all of these things are vital, and to me is the key to cells working optimally. And, I can use an example that I sponsor a mixed martial arts group back home, and when I watch the efficiency of these guys in training and what they do, it always amazes me how efficient they are at everything they do. Well, kidney cells are kind of like these little mixed martial arts fighters. They're constantly on the front lines dealing with more stuff than you can imagine, and it's coming at them very fast. Mm-hmm. And they're dealing with it very efficiently day in and day out. And that always amazes me, but it's the redox signaling molecules in those cells that allow them to do that. Their reflexes are faster with more molecules. Their adaptation is faster and better, and their recovery times are faster because they're running at full efficiency.
Excellent.
Cells function that we mentioned before that deals with redox signaling messages are the antioxidant functions, mm-hmm. right? They protect them, the refurbishment of the shields of the cells, and the mailboxes, the lubrication that keeps the messengers going in and out, the chemical messengers, which are hormones and other important things, and also the cell phones that mm-hmm. carry the signals back and forth. Well, who in the body, talking about which group of cells, do you think needs these things most? They need to protect themselves. They need to be able to communicate, to carry on all of the complex functions of filtering out the toxins. And they need to be able to communicate very clearly with one another using their cell phones and hormones that are constantly telling them what to do. So these redox signaling molecules perform an absolute essential function for kidney cells.
Excellent. Very fascinating discussion today. I appreciate the time that you've taken. So once again, thank you, Dr. David Carpenter. Thank you, Dr. Gary Samuelson.